A few years ago, one of my friends who is a priest was preaching, and he was talking in his homily about the importance of meditating on Jesus' wounds. And he's giving a rousing homily, it sounds like, and he happened to be preaching in Spanish, and the word for wounds in Spanish is llagas. But he got his vocabulary mixed up in his head, and he kept saying llantas, which in Spanish means the tires on your car. The people were confused. At a certain point, someone shouted out, "Llagas," and he figured it out. I laughed at him, pretty good at that. But it's interesting, as I found myself thinking about his homily, I realized I actually myself do a poor job of meditating on Jesus' wounds. We preach about Jesus' crucifixion all the time, but I have so rarely slowed down to just consider Jesus' wounds individually. And I found that thanks to his homily, I found that as I start to make that part of my prayer, as I slow down and reflect on his wounds one by one, it deepens my encounter with Jesus. It deepens my appreciation for him and his humanity, what he's done for me and for my sins, for my salvation. And it's deepened my experience of Jesus' presence in the Eucharist, because this is his most precious body and blood. Today is the feast of the most precious body and blood of Christ. And when we use those words, you're used to thinking about the Eucharist. But first of all, I think we have to think about Jesus' physical body and blood. We wouldn't have the sacrament if it weren't for the wounds that he suffered in his body. And so today I just want to briefly look at the wounds that Jesus went through as a way of deepening our experience of the Eucharist. You consider some of his wounds. I mean, I can't even get to all of them. You consider the scourgings as well. But you begin with that crown of thorns. They took thistle, they wound it into a crown, and shoved it into his head. To think about those long thorns pressing into his skin, piercing his skin, blood coming down his face. They're mocking him, calling him King of the Jews, and bowing down and pretending to admire him and worship him. The sad thing is, Jesus really is the King of the Jews, and he deserves a lot better than that. He really is the King of the Jews in the sense that he is the rightful successor to King David. If he lived centuries before this, he probably would have worn a real crown made out of precious metals with precious stones, and people really would have respected him as a king. But these men are mocking him. And so for me to meditate on the wounds, or the multiple wounds that those thorns caused, is to reflect on Jesus' humility. Here he is, King of the universe, King of us all, and he's allowing himself to be treated like that. So I think we notice Jesus' humility there. Then, historically, we've meditated on the two wounds in his hands, one on his right, one on his left, separate wounds to meditate on. So for me, when I meditate on Jesus' right hand, I like to reflect on the powerful things Jesus did. I think about Jesus using that hand to forgive people's sins and to cast out demons and to heal people of their illnesses. I imagine him standing outside the tomb of Lazarus, his friend, as he extends his right hand and shouts, "Lazarus, come out." For me, the right hand of Jesus is his hand that shows how powerful he is. It's his divinity. In his left hand, I think about Jesus' gentleness. I think about his embrace of the children who came to him. I think about maybe when he healed St. Peter's mother-in-law of a fever. I imagine her just grabbing her by the hand and helping her sit up. I imagine him holding the water to wash the feet of the apostles with his left hand. For me, that left hand symbolizes his service, that though he is king, though he is all-powerful, he makes himself the least of all. He makes himself the weakest, the last in line. Then we meditate on the wounds of his feet. I think about where those feet had gone prior to being nailed to that wood that day. His feet carried him everywhere. He didn't actually have a car with 5 tires. Jesus had to walk everywhere, and he wore sandals, and his feet were probably always dirty. I think about those dirty feet and all the places they took him, to the wedding feast at Cana, to Jerusalem, to every person that he encountered. If he encountered somebody, it was because his feet took him there. He wore those feet out, I'm sure. So for me, it shows just his longing, his desire to be with people when I think about Jesus' feet, and we've nailed them to a cross. And then, historically, we've meditated on the wound in his side. Jesus died on the cross. He was dead. But just to make sure he was dead, they thrust a lance into his side to pierce his heart. And, of course, in some ways, he didn't suffer that wound. He was already dead. But we've meditated on this as Christians, I think because it carries like a bigger symbolic value here. Jesus loved us with his whole heart, and we pierced it. We pierced it with our sins, with our hypocrisy, with our laziness, with our hatred. We pierced it with our lukewarm faith. And Jesus is always reminding us of his pierced heart when we come to Mass. We can't get away from it. We love the Mass, we love the Eucharist, and the Eucharist gives us joy and peace and life and grace, but all of those things came at a cost. Because when we celebrate the Mass, we always celebrate the body and the blood. We always consecrate the blood. Like, we can't ever forget he shed his blood for us. The love that he gives to us, the graces, the joy, the peace, the forgiveness of sins, all of it came at a great cost. He shed his blood. He died for us. And I think if we really meditate on the wounds, and if we really meditate on the cross, if we meditate on what this means, then we're going to want to give him our whole heart back. Because that happens. When we see how someone loves us in a sacrificial way, we're just drawn to them. If you have a coworker who sticks their neck out on the line for you, you suddenly have this new appreciation for that coworker. Now, you have this maybe closeness with them now. If you have a friend or a family member who really goes above and beyond in doing something for you, your heart just is enlivened with love for this person. You want to love them better because they've loved you so well. So I think when we choose to meditate on his cross, on his wounds, and on the Eucharist, and what it really means, that we're going to want to give Jesus our whole heart. He gave us his body and his blood. He gave us everything. So today, may we also love him with our whole heart. May we give him everything.